My name's Di Wastonage. I'm going to be leading through the next session, which is all about animal welfare 2021 and beyond. In complete contrast to this morning's topics, I think we've got a really interesting session this afternoon. We're sponsored by Women in Dairy, and I'm delighted to be joined by a trio of speakers. And we have Alice Swift, who's our Agricultural Director at Arla. We've got Adam Butelaar, MD of Butelaar, and we've also got David Black at VetSalou. So we'll be really covering some of those pertinent topics of the day around animal welfare, who's responsible, asking those really deep questions and trying to solve some answers, through to the issues around the dairy bull calves. So just before we start then, I'd just mention a little bit of housekeeping, and if everybody could just keep their videos off and computers on mute, that'd be great. If you're going to use Twitter, it's #DairyTech. The speakers, the plan really, I think, for Alice, David and Adam is that we'll just talk for about 10 to 15 minutes and then we'll join together at the end and have a Q&A session. So please do send us your questions, enter them in the chat box, they'll be fielded through. It'd be great if you can put your name on them too. And then we can go from there and, you know, let's have an enjoyable session. So thank you to all our sponsors as well, Women in Dairy, and we'll kick off. Shall we go straight to Alice Swift from Arla? Thank you, Alice.
Thank you, Di. I'm hoping that you can hear me. Thank you. I can't actually see, are the slides coming up? Perfect. Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to join this panel. But actually, this is my first public speaking event in this role as Director of Agriculture at Arla. So I was just going to take a minute to introduce myself. So there we are. Just moving the slides on. So in terms of my background, I am a farmer's daughter. I was brought up in Northumberland on my parents' hill farm, so beef and sheep background. But I think I had, 18 years work experience, if you like, before I went off to college at Harper Adams in 2001. But being brought up on a farm, it really opens your eyes to the realities clearly of farming, the ups and downs, which I think, that background has really helped me have the career that I've had to date. But going to Harper Adams really helped me define my career path. I actually had a placement year with Tesco in 2003, the kind of golden ages of supermarkets, if you like, when margins were high and recessions hadn't kicked in. And I gained an enormous amount of experience into the opportunities for agrics like myself, connecting customers with food through the agriculture teams within these businesses, working really closely with the commercial buyers. When I graduated from Harper, I went to the NFU for a very short stint, but then a job came up at Tesco, and between Tesco and Sainsbury's, I had 12 years experience working for supermarkets. And what that taught me really was the importance of the customer, the consumer demand, and responding to that, but also the ability that we have to influence change for the better. Through standards, aligned groups, and really getting a solid understanding of how we take food from the farm right through to the shops and the supermarkets. But 12 years was enough for me, and then I got the opportunity to join Arla. It very much felt like going home. I enjoyed working for PLCs, but it's fair to say my background makes me much more suited to working for a farmer-owned co-op. So I've been with Arla 3 years, and I'm now delighted to be heading up the Ag division and working closely along with them. I'm also a mum. There's the two kids, William and Elizabeth. They help keep my feet firmly on the ground, and I'm living in Warwickshire. So in terms of, I'm just going to take probably 8 minutes to cover a bit of background on where we see animal welfare today and the importance of it for our industry, because this year we made a significant move on the subject of animal welfare, probably the biggest move Arla have ever made in this space, and that was when we introduced the standard that from January this year, no Arla calf, no healthy Arla calf can be euthanized within the first 8 weeks of life. And the reason we made that move 2 years ago when we started working on this was because of our brand. So Arla is a household brand now. Some are often surprised to hear that we're the third largest food company in the UK. Last year was a phenomenal year for the brand. So with consumers staying at home more, drinking more tea, having more meals at home, our sales of branded products actually reached 1 billion, which was a significant milestone. And as our brand grows, so we're in 13% growth last year of Arla branded products, so does that need to protect it. And more consumers are becoming more familiar with our brands. So our Arla Milks, the Cravendales, the Big Milk, the Bob, but also the Anchor and the Lurpak, significant brands, and consumers have an expectations that we're acting responsibly, which is the motive behind introducing this standard. But it hasn't been easy. We've recognised that this standard, it's hard, it's tough. It's been on the difficult pile because it's highly contentious. And it hasn't been easy for these reasons. I think farms that are under TB restriction, those that have the smaller stature cows that perhaps using the block system, perhaps rearing capacity, it does make this standard challenging. And I've been really impressed with how our farmer owners have actually embraced the challenge and got behind it, because they recognise that the strength of the Arla brand is working for them. In terms of farm gate price, we've managed to deliver some stability for the last few years, and if we want to continue to grow our brand, we absolutely have to get our house in order in terms of farm standards right at grassroots level. So how did we make this move? Because it is significant and you can't do something like this overnight. Well, in 2018, we launched our Arla 360 programme, which is our programme. It's owned by the farmers. It's a standard that doesn't just cover animal welfare, it also covers sustainability, business resilience, how farms interact with their communities, the worker welfare aspect of it, but clearly animal welfare is a key component, and a key standard within it was the calf standard. So keeping those calves alive for the first 8 weeks and hopefully beyond that, so that these animals have a life worth living. And this programme has actually allowed Arla to take the lead in terms of standards. So for supermarkets that are willing to trust the processes to manage the supply side for them, Arla 360 is an option for them to have a group of aligned farmers operating to a standard that they're really passionate about because they own it. And Aldi came to the party in 2018, committing 25% of their volume to the programme. And then in 2019, Morrison's followed, and this is where my connection with Adam will come in shortly, and committed 100% of their milk volume to the 360 standard. But our farmers felt, yes, this is the right thing to do, but this shouldn't be classed as a leading standard. This is just the right thing to do in terms of baseline. Our consumers expect us to take care of every calf and give it that life worth living. So because we're a democratic farmer-owned company, the elected farmers that represent the wider group voted to introduce this standard across our entire business from January this year. Now, in the UK, we have Red Tractor, but because we operate across 7 countries, we need an animal welfare programme that stretches, a farm assurance programme that stretches across all 7 countries. So that's where Arla Garden come in, because we operate across 7 countries. It's the way of ensuring that our products are all produced on farm to a similar standard, because actually we're a global business. We're selling products to 150 countries, and we need to ensure to all those customers that we've got high standards of welfare at farm. So why does this every calf as a value policy matter? Because I know it's not easy. I know our Arla farmers are currently feeling like it's tough. We're asking a lot of them. We're having to do more to build the trust with our consumers. And that's because, today, you don't have to be a journalist to get anti-dairy propaganda out there. You know, everyone has access to social media, and there's lots of awful stories, pictures, articles damning our industry. And we're coming under an enormous attack, and it's really tough for us all, especially for those that are on social media. You may have been victim to that attack, but that isn't going to go away. And we have to ensure that we get our house in order so that they can't attack us. And it's much easier for them to attack than it is for us to defend. And we can only defend what we do as an industry and as a brand if we know that we have our house in order and that we have, you know, these high standards, and that calves aren't being euthanized within the first few days of life. But this is difficult. What have we done to support our farmers? We actually, because of this increased attack from the anti-dairy lobby, we initiated a Proud initiative, which is all about supporting farmers in checking how consumers might perceive their farms. So giving them lots of helpful tips in how to, you know, ensure the farm appearance of their farm doesn't attract unwanted visitors and camera angles and what have you. And also our farmers' continued commitment and tolerance, I guess, of our standards. So the Arla Garden programme, Arla 360, that is all ways that we can use to demonstrate to customers that our farmers are doing the right thing by the animals and their environment. But listening to our consumers is key. Whilst we don't like what we hear, we can't ignore it. And the gap between our consumers and our farmers is growing. And it's because of that gap in what they know and what they perceive to know about farming. And, you know, as a farmer's daughter, it winds me up, you know, like it will wind you up, reading some of the anti-dairy propaganda, because it's, you know, it's so misleading and it's twisted, and it's really doing us a disservice, because I know nobody cares more about their cows and calves than farmers themselves. But we have to listen to our consumers. So last year we commissioned a bit of consumer research to see what's on the mind of our customers. What do they think when they're buying dairy? What concerns them? And what do they comment on when prompted on certain subjects? And the one area that really triggers a very emotive response and brings out that guilt is around animal welfare. And it's because they've seen these images on social media of calves perhaps dead on farm, or lame cows, downer cows, that have distorted their view of farming. And we want to, as Arla, we want to be in a position where we can start being on the front foot with messages that we get to our consumers that actually, you know, we don't want to give any consumer a reason not to buy dairy. And by introducing the Every Calf as a Value policy, it helps those steps in getting closer to our consumers, because we can be confident that if we go out with something positive, they can't throw something negative back at us. So how have we helped our farmers prepare for this change? Because it is, whilst some of our farmers are already there, they're already compliant with it, for some it is really difficult. So we've been on the front foot, working very closely with our farmers and other people within the industry to come up with solutions, because we're well aware there's more calves on the market and we need to create new homes for the calves. And actually I'm really proud that we've actually managed to secure an extra 11,000 places for calves by working with the beef industry to create a demand for them. We've also done some really interesting work with Cogent, looking at breeding trials, where to dispel some of the myths around sex semen, because sex semen will help us hugely in terms of reducing the number of calves that may not be viable by turning them into heifers. But they've done bespoke trials for us, where they have worked with a group of our farmers, genomic tested the heifers and some of the cows to ensure that they're breeding from the best. So in terms of their top cows, they're putting it to sex semen and then putting beef to rest. And they've actually gone as far to develop a Cogent customer index, which builds in our milk price schedule. So our farmers can make breeding decisions based on optimizing that cow's potential to produce milk that really goes well against our schedule. And we've seen some really positive results on the back of this 2.5-year breeding programme, and we've seen levels of fat and protein doubled on some herds through really being specific in terms of that genetics piece. We've hosted a number of workshops. We've engaged trying to get, calves the right start. The beef industry, they need the right calf. It could have the right genetics, but if it gets a bad start, it just won't thrive. So ensuring that we've done everything we can to ensure that our farmers have the support that they need. But this couldn't have been possible without the support of our retailers and our supply chain partners like Butelar. And this is the first time we've actually asked our farmers to think beef, but it's the shops that know what consumers are demanding. With Sainsbury's, it's a very specific scheme around Aberdeen Angus, because they know they can introduce that to the Taste the Difference range and command a premium for that. And then Asda have been incredibly helpful and supportive by funding temporary housing trials. So farms, particularly that are under TB, often don't have enough room to house the calves. So we've looked at some polytunnel trials. So you can put up a polytunnel for 7,500, a few extra thousand for ground costs, but those calves have performed as well, and in some cases better, than the ones in the fixed term housing, because actually they've got better levels of humidity, which has meant they haven't had seen the levels of pneumonia. We've also done a really interesting trial, what we call Project Vita, which is working with Meadow Quality and a private investor, which has seen them take calves from small stature, so block calving, small stature cows and under TB restriction. They go in to rear for 8 weeks. When they get to that 8 weeks, they get graded in terms of A, B, Cs. The A's and B's can go on to a market, but the C's may end up in an abattoir, but they've reached that 8 weeks. And that option has been really welcomed by our farmers, those that just don't have the capacity to rear those calves and look after them, knowing that they're being well cared for on those specific rearing units. And also with TB, really challenging, working with TBAS, looking at the age of testing and improving the consistency and practical application of the rules behind AFU units and isolation has been key. But I think this cross supply chain collaboration has been absolutely key to making this policy land well, because we can't do it without the support and help of the beef industry. And this is my segue to hand over to Adam, who is going to touch on the specific work that we've been doing with him and Morrison's to find new homes for these calves and rear them in a way that means they can end up in a steak pack on the Morrison shelves. But hopefully that has given you a flavour for the importance of animal welfare now and looking forward as our consumers become increasingly discerning. But we have a brand and an industry that we all have to work together to protect.
That's lovely. Thank you, Alice. It covered quite a lot of points there. Just a reminder to everybody, if you've got any questions, do send them through and we'll come back to Alice later on in the conversation. I'd now like to introduce Adam. Just one apology, Adam, I did call you an MD of Butelar, and I do know that you're a chief exec, so do apologise for that one. But yes, please do take the lead.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Can you see me? I'm not sure. I can't see myself. Sorry. Yeah. Anyway, okay. Well, thank you very much, Di. And oh, here we go. Sorry, a few technical issues. Right, we're here now. Oh, okay, never mind. Right. So yeah, thank you very much, Di. And yeah, that was really great to great insight there, Alice, and you know, I'd just like to say that we've been working with Arla for the last, I think, since October 18, and you really support what Arla are doing, and I think it was a really good move for the industry in what's been done. So it was really good for them to take the lead. So anything we've been able to do to support, we have been very happy to do. So what I would like to do, if that's possible, is just give you a little background of Butalar, and then talk about obviously the key things that we're going to be doing. So so just very basically then, Butalar are a integrated supply chain. So we buy the young calves off farm and take them all the way, put them on contracts and take them all the way through to fat. So we do around 48,000 cattle a year from calf to fat. Through the last couple of years, we've been very lucky to win some quite prestigious awards. So Dairy Ambassador for the Cream Awards and several awards on supply chain. And we're also very proud that we have won the Good Calf Awards with Compassion of World Farming on welfare. So it's very much what we're about. Very basically, our chain works it's all around the dairy farmer and all around farming. So it's obviously the calves come off the dairy farm, and then we put them on we take them at 2 weeks old, 3 weeks old. We put them into rearing units for 3 months, and then we contract them onto farm. And the Butalar style is that we underwrite prices so the farmer always knows where he's going to be going through the chain. We process our own meat and sell that to all sorts of different people, anywhere from some of the food restaurants like McDonald's and Morrison's, and also some high-end London restaurants as well, and obviously internationally as well. We're big believers in adding value, so we have 2 pet food plants, one in the UK and one in the Netherlands. So we're trying to make the most out of every carcass, and we have hide, skins and leather business, and we do the vast majority of the sheepskins for UGG in China and Australia. So that's another string to the bow. So it's just to give you a bit of an insight to our supply chain. So let's move slides. Yeah, not going too well here, am I? We work with just over 2,000 farmers, from dairy farmers to beef farmers. So the group is quite large, and we've been very happy to work very closely in collaboration with Morrison's on a lot of the beef side. We actually process all of our animals with Morrison's in the Woodheads factories. Work very closely with McDonald's and McDonald's have been incredibly supportive of what we've been doing over the years, and obviously more recently with Arla on the 360 program. So some really good partners to work with. What we do in our own supply chain, we have our own vets, and we support all of our farmers with our veterinary advice. So we have the Butalar vet team, and we have a tech team, which is virtually a man in a van, but mostly actually ladies in vans. And we have 7 of those ladies that go around the country, and they're not vets, but they look after calf health and various different things to make sure that people are rearing these calves in the correct way. And then we have a nutrition team that do a very similar thing. Alice earlier mentioned TB, and it's something that is always quite easy to sit up and talk in front of a lot of people of what you're going to do, but it's also more difficult to actually do that. And I think Alice has proved what she's done, in fairness to her. And I think we are also the same. When we started the Arla program, we invested very heavily into TB units. I think we have more TB spaces than anyone else in the UK. We've just built a brand new farm that's going to hold 1,800 TB or AFU calves as well, so that we can look after our dairy farmer suppliers when and if they're unfortunate to go down with TB. In this same farm, we have put up several different types of buildings. So what Alice was talking about earlier, some temporary buildings that we can put on farm with insulated roofs, and the idea is to use less antibiotics and have more calf health. And we've also kept some traditional buildings up, which are often on farm, and try to make different things like air tunnels and all sorts of different things to try and do different trials and weight gains. And this is quite, I mean, I think this is going to be very interesting once we're out of lockdown and, please God, back to a bit of normality. We're going to hold quite a lot of open days, and this is going to be open to anybody that would like to come and have a look on certain times. On the crossbred calves, so small stature herds, so with a percentage of Jersey in them, and we've done quite a lot of trials with those calves as well. And because we're a fully integrated system, we can follow right the way through from the young calf to the fat animal, and then obviously deboning yields and various different things. So it's something we've worked very hard on. So talking about what the challenge is, so I always try and talk about a challenge, but I also try and find a solution. And the challenge we've got in the dairy and beef industry at the moment is public opinion. And as Alice rightly said, you know, that sometimes it's very unfair and really not good, and it's often the minority influencing the majority. And now, you know, with this day and age of everything being online, you know, 2 or 3 influencers can really make a massive difference to a majority. The solution really is, in my mind, is very common sense. So for non-euthanization of calves, absolutely, I've always been very much against this, because I think we've been doing our own industry a lot of harm. And, you know, we talk about the brand of Arla or the brand of Butilar, but actually it's the brand of farming, and it's the brand of this is a massive brand. You know, if the brand isn't correct, people won't drink milk, people won't eat meat, and we must make sure people understand the full value of that. And look, to be honest with you, we're not going to change probably people from being vegan. That's you know, it's a very tough choice to be a vegan, and they're probably not going to change to being milk drinkers or beef eaters. But there's a lot of people sat on the fence getting a lot of misinformation. So we must make sure that our farms are absolutely, you know, absolutely top notch, and that we can make sure that we're demonstrating good animal welfare, practical animal welfare at all times. The future, I think once we know we've all got our acts in gear, we need to really shout about it. We need to be like the minority influencing the majority, the same as on the other side. And I think most of all, we need to secure a future for our children. I mean, our children need the choice to farm. Whether they farm or not is up to them, but you know, we need to make sure there is a future in our industry for people to come and for our children to be able to do that. The challenge that we've currently got, I think the biggest challenge is the crossbred calves, so out of the small stature cows, and the solution is feeding them correctly, so making sure that we look after them. You know, I want to make sure that people don't just keep them for 8 weeks and don't pump a lot of food into them, because if they don't do that, they're not going to end up with a very good product. Keeping them healthy is very, very, very important, and making sure they're in a good environment and got lots of space and looked after well. The opportunities really are, as we are taking certain young calves off farms, so we can help some of the people with the crossbred herds. We also have a project that we've done with several Arla farms now. So this year we'll see us take around 1,400 calves. We've contracted 1,400 calves currently. People starting to calve now, and the farmers are rearing them to 140 kilos, and then we're buying them so much per kilo. So that's another option. And then the other option is to fatten the animals right the way through. And a lot of dairy farms say, well, no, that's not my business, and I don't fatten them right the way through. But if there is an underwritten price, and if there's a percentage return on the money, maybe it's just something we should all discuss. And I think we should have our minds open to everything. The future, we need to create, you know, we need to create partnerships with companies that want to buy your animals, whether that's Butilar or another. It's just making sure that there's a good relationship going through. One of the bigger challenges of the crossbred calf is actually making money from them, and of course, you know, they're obviously designed to be a dairy cow, and they often haven't got the shape and various different things, but we can improve that with genetics. And I know obviously with Arla working with Cogent, and you know, we work with quite a few different AI companies, Cogent and Genus and Norbreck. And all those guys are really trying hard to make sure the genetics are better. So I think obviously using sex semen on your to try and get as many dairy heifers, and then using things like blue or various different things on your others, I think is a really clever way of going on, and I think you're going to add value. And good calf rearing, you know, putting the time and the effort into those calves, making sure they're healthy, and the result will be that you will have a lot of customers. And I think that's so important, because if the animal is not fed right and not looked after right, you're not going to have many customers. but if things are done correct, that it's going to be a, there's going to be a good market for these animals. So something I feel that we don't do very well in the farming business, I think we've got to be incredibly proud of what we do. The vast majority of farms do a hell of a job, and I think really, we've got to promote the brand of farming, and whether that's sharing some tasty recipes, whether that's something with meat or even milk. I think the more that we can put tweets out or Instagram or anything that we can do to really kind of make farming cool, make what we do cool, and positive inspiring images, making, even if it's the children feeding calves, or it's calves on a frosty morning, or it's it's nice straw bedded yards with calves in. I think it's really important to get that out there. Good news with carbon emissions. I think there's been a lot of harm done to the cattle industry of all talking about carbon. And I think now there's not as many planes flying around and cars going around. I think you're seeing that down, and you're seeing it's not all the cattle's fault. And even better with animals out of the dairy herd is these animals, their mothers take the emissions because they're in the world to produce milk. So these animals are lower carbon, and if the process at a young age as well, it really tick all the boxes. The health benefits of a balanced diet. I think not only do these animals taste really good, they are making sure that people's diets are really good. And I think, again, I'm not trying to knock the vegan diet, although I did try it for 2 days once and I was really miserable. But I always say don't knock anything unless you try it, but certainly it wasn't possible for me. I'm a real steak and milk man. But I think getting those diets right is really difficult on vegan diets. So I think the balanced diet of beef and meat and milk is very important. But I think supporting local farming families, really we say that maybe not enough. I think that everyone likes to visit the countryside. We want everything nicely groomed and done. At the end of the day, everybody has to earn a living, and we talk about sustainable farming. Well, surely sustainable farming, the most sustainable thing, make sure that families earn a living, and I think that's very important. And if we can make sure our brand is right, then that's where we need to be. So finally, this is one of our units at our new AFU. These are some new buildings that they're all insulated roofs and panels, no concrete walls, very warm. This unit is actually averaging 1.3 kilos a day from the day that the calves go in. It's the best we've ever done, and we're happy to help or advise anybody that's got any interest, or hopefully visit this soon, and hopefully be able to have a beef bap and maybe even a pint at some stage would be great. But look, we're here to help. If anybody would like to contact Butlar about any of the schemes we do, or even if it's just general advice, because we're all in the same industry, we're all on the same side, and anything we can do to help anybody, then we're certainly there. So yeah, I'd like to say thank you for giving me the time, and hopefully hear back from a few of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adam. That was really interesting, and it's just another example of how your business has really changed in such a short period of time to keep pace with the marketplace. And like you said, I'm sure it's posed some questions there, so thank you. We'll move on to our third speaker. David, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
Lovely, okay.
We'll hopefully get some slides appearing in a second. There we go. So thank you very much indeed for inviting me to speak. I've got it's a huge subject to cover, of course, so I'm really going to skip through and try and get a few headlines if I can out of it. Now then, let's just get this to move on if we can. Find the button that works. There we go. Thank you. So just I really wanted to say thank you to RABDF for going ahead and having this dairy check online. I think it's a great credit to everybody involved. And when I was looking online, I noticed that I actually was there last year. There's me at the bottom speaking to Mark Roach. So there's evidence that I was, and I've always enjoyed the event when I've been there. So for vets, this is really important. When we become vets, actually anywhere in the world, but largely in the UK, this is the oath that we take. This is the declaration that we make. And if you can see in the highlighted bit at the bottom, it is our constant endeavour to ensure the health and welfare of animals under our care. And that's really important to us, and no least through the COVID crisis, because as well as having our staff and customers and clients to worry about, we've also had to think about the care of those animals throughout COVID and trying to work around that and make it work. Can people actually see me, Di? Or is it because I can't see myself? You can. Okay, that's grand. So we're very privileged as vets, because we work and live at the very intersection of animal health, human health, and environmental health. We're in a very privileged position now, whether that be in the good times or in the bottom right-hand corner of that slide during foot and mouth, which was, I thought, the career-changing epidemic of my career, but it seems like we've had another career-changing epidemic come along more recently. But it's throughout our working lives, we're at that very intersection, and it's important to remember things like the fact that of 80% of the last diseases that have appeared, that have actually, including COVID, 80% of them are zoonotic. 80% of them are diseases that humans can get. So it's very important to understand that from an animal health point of view. So I've got a few hats that I wear various. When you get to my age, you tend to get involved in lots of different things. So I've got a few hats, and I'm sort of here today representing, can we just go back a slide, please? I'm here sort of representing VetSalus, which is a global collaboration of livestock vets who are interested in One Health, sustainability, and working across the globe really to look at some of these aspects of animal health and welfare, but also to talk a little bit about Vet Sustain. Now, this is a brand new initiative that was founded by Laura Hyam last year. I'm very lucky to be a director on the board of Vet Sustain, but this is a not-for-profit organisation established to enable, inspire, empower vets to look at sustainability in all aspects of what we do, whether that be from a personal point of view within the vet-led businesses that we work in, or whether that be as advocates, because I think we've probably got quite a big role to play as advocates within the sustainability piece. I'm not sure which of the buttons of my computer is actually moving these things forward. I need to find which one. There we go. So you'll be aware or some of you'll be aware of the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals, the SDGs as they're known, and these are the 17 goals that have been laid out by the UN for all aspects of global sustainability. And what we've done within the Vet Sustain field is we've taken the areas that we think are relevant from the veterinary point of view, and we've then mapped those against the UN's SDGs. And I don't have time to talk about them all today. The one we're talking about today, obviously, is animal health and welfare, which is this one. So if we look at that in a little bit more detail, this is some of the aspects of what we see as a good life for animals. That whole piece about safeguarding and being advocates for their health and welfare, both in life and at the point of death, is very important. And Di's touched on this already about a life worth living, and we'd add to that a good death as well. That's very important as well. And we've mapped those against at least, well, 6 of the SDGs are relevant to animal health and welfare. And that's, I don't have time to go through all the points, but really it's around the advocating of the animal health and how that's a core sustainability objective, and how animal health and welfare actually impacts on so many of the SDGs, whether that be good health and well-being, whether it's life on land, or whether it's zero hunger. So how do we define animal welfare? Well, it's probably changed over the years from the initial definitions back in Bramble Report of 1965 and the Farm Animal Welfare Council in 1979. And that time, the 5 freedoms were developed, and really these have become pretty much accepted and fairly unchanged over the last number of years. So we're looking at the freedom from hunger and thirst, freedom from discomfort, freedom from pain, injury and disease, freedom to express normal behaviour, and freedom from fear and distress. And that's been a fairly accepted way of defining animal welfare until recently. And I think we're now starting to think a lot more along the lines that Alice and Adam were talking about, around that idea of lives worth living. And the fact that possibly the 5 freedoms actually focus too much on welfare, poor welfare and suffering, as opposed to positive experiences. So that we're looking more towards the fact that we should be providing animals with opportunities to have positive experiences rather than just limiting their exposure to negative experiences. And this has been pretty much laid out by Mellor back in 2016. And there's a huge range of other benefits attached to health and welfare, and just one of them is antimicrobial use. And there's quite a lot of evidence coming through now, a paper by Manteca in 2019, that is demonstrating quite a clear link between animal health and animal welfare and antimicrobial resistance. And really just the whole concept, it's intuitive, isn't it, to actually believe that, but there are actually quite a lot of science now to demonstrate this, and there's quite a lot of mechanisms, largely around stress, largely around cortisol, whereby animal welfare is actually impacting on things like antimicrobial use, which in turn will impact on antimicrobial resistance. And slightly embarrassing, Di showed a very good piece of social science. This is really just a bit of fun, but this is a colleague in New Zealand who sent me this, which is a poll taken at a very similar event to this, I believe, in New Zealand, where farmers were given a coloured ball and they were asked to put them in a jar as to what they saw as the most important aspects of their business. And you can't probably see it on the slide, but people was reasonably high, but environment and animal welfare were two of the highest aspects of what farmers felt was important, and both Alice and Adam have touched on that already. So where do we go for food 2050? Where are we going to be needing to provide food? And Alice talked about consumers during her presentation, and I think there's a really important discussion to be had around the difference between the customer, the consumer, and the citizen. And this is a photograph of Dame Fiona Reynolds, who was Director General of the National Trust and is now Chair of the National Audit Office. But she said a piece about this shift from the consumer to the citizen is a truly big idea. And she encouraged anybody who had any opportunity to contribute to that strategic thinking to think quite hard about it, because of course the customer may not actually be the person that consumes that product. It may be somebody that's buying food for the school, or it might be a parent who's buying food for their children, but they're never going to consume it. And then of course we've got the citizen who might never buy the food or consume it, but has a view. And I think there's quite an interesting concept there, because quite often the citizen is quite an important view and quite an influential opinion, despite the fact they're not a customer or a consumer. And as Alice has already touched on, you'd think we'd compare notes. We haven't. This is largely driven by perception much of the time, whereas you have scientists, vets, and experts who tend to be driven more by evidence and fact. And it's a wide generalization, I accept that. But as a rule, that's where we are. And I suspect we've got quite a big disconnect between the perceptions and the facts. And then we've talked about the vegan, vegetarian, flexitarian. We've talked about the welfare, and we'll just touch on assurance in a minute. We've got all aspects of sustainability. I mean, fundamentally, sustainability is about enough for everyone forever, but there's all aspects of that we can think about. And this is a really important concept as well, I think, is social license, that ongoing approval and acceptance of stakeholders. And this is a slide that I've adapted from Jeff Brose from Cargill, but I think Jeff really touched on this really, really well, I think, because there is a tipping point between a social license and social control. And I think at the moment, vets and farmers and the industry that we all work in has got quite a lot of social license. And that is around ethics, values, expectations, the fact that we're self-regulated. The veterinary profession in the UK is still self-regulated, and we want to remain so. But it's a flexible, responsible, lower cost, but it requires a lot of trust from the general public. And if we don't demonstrate that, we'll be tipped over into a social control situation, and we nearly went into this with antimicrobials some years ago when there was quite a strong voice saying that should be much more controlled. I think at the moment vets still have some social license, and our profession is trusted on that to some degree. But if we go into social control, it becomes much more expensive, much more bureaucratic. There's much more regulation and legislation. So I think Adam touched on this in a slightly different way, but we really need to maintain that trust and confidence from the general public, because animal welfare is about public trust. And as we move into the ELMS, an animal welfare pathway, it's about public money for public good. Really just to touch on assurance schemes, this is the British Veterinary Association mapped out the assurance schemes and sort of tick boxes on where we believe that they hit the targets that the vets profession has set, but really an encouragement to choose #ChooseAssured. Each of the schemes, we can argue all day about the pros and cons, but fundamentally we do have to have schemes that assure the products that we're eating. And really, just to wrap up a little bit where the future is for vets, this is a survey that was done across the European veterinary profession a couple of years ago, and they asked vets where they thought they were going to be working more in the future, and the largest percentage of that was in animal welfare, and followed quickly by companion animals and exotic animals. But most vets across Europe think they're going to be doing a lot more work in that animal welfare space. And on the same survey, this was asking vets how well they thought they were regarded by the general public in their country. And I'm afraid the UK are not in this survey. I'm not sure why, but you can see a massive comparison between in Sweden, where vets tend to feel that they're well respected and well regarded, and their views would be followed or thought about, down to Italy, where it's completely the opposite. But the point is here I'm trying to make is that as a profession, vets have got a role in advocacy and trying to take people on the journey, as well as doing what we can within our own vet-led businesses. And it's not about the vets, really. It's not always about the vets. There's lots of other people associated within our vet-led businesses, whether they be vet nurses or veterinary technicians. But we fundamentally don't want to be the story of the three vets, where there's one vet wakes up one morning. You know, we want to be the vets that get up and make things happen. We want to be the ones that make a difference within the vet sustain group. We don't want to just be the ones that watch it happen, and we don't want to be the ones that wake up one morning and think, what the has just happened. So we're trying to lead and trying to take a role on that. And I've been using this slide for probably 20 years, and it's always my wrap-up slide, and I keep thinking I should change it, but actually there's no need to change it because the principle is the same. A future of farming needs a healthy industry, which needs healthy animals. This is the lead cow. You can see that anybody knows cows knows this is the lead cow, and it's painted by Bonnie Moore. But fundamentally, that's what the industry needs. Thank you, Di.
Thank you, David. That was really interesting. It's posed quite a few questions, so if I can invite the other guests back to the virtual stage, I'll fire away. So I think one of the key ones is we're only good as our weakest link in the industry. I mean, do you have any thoughts on how we can take all farmers on these journeys for animal welfare? Would you like to start with that one, Alice, and we'll rotate round?
Yeah, I think it's sharing the facts with farmers, whilst we don't like hearing what the consumers say, because it is often so distant from reality and what farmers know. But I think when you look at those facts, it helps bring, you know, us back to the reason why we have to remain focused on doing the right thing. And I guess, you know, within Arla, our farmers have a vested interest in that. The more we protect the brand and do the right thing at farm level, they get a return in their milk price because we're able to promote the products, and we become a brand of choice. So I think engaging on the facts and the reality, whilst we don't like what we hear, we can't not we can't ignore what consumers are saying. We've got to face into it and work to close that gap, and we'll only close that gap if we look at the truths and be really transparent on what's happening on farm. And you're only as good as your worst farm. So you know, before we can promote the industry, we have to get the tail to come with us, because they do leave us exposed.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's some good comments. And David, how do you feel that is with, you know, being a vet? How can you take the farmers on this journey that aren't probably being led by their processor at the moment?
Well, that's an interesting point, Di, because I guess it's in some ways it's frustrating that farmers are necessarily led by the processors, because we should be in a position. There's certainly been examples as a vet where we've tried to change things, implement vaccination protocols, or whether it be teat sealants or whatever it might be, that we haven't been able to get over the line until the processor comes in and insists on it, and then it happens overnight. And I guess that's the sad fact of it. Alice is absolutely right. There tends to be a tale of people who are maybe just slower to come. But I think by having advocates, by having almost leaders, there's always going to be those leaders that are going to be the ones that set out and use the technologies. I'm a massive believer in agri-tech. There's so much we can do. One of my other hats is on advanced breeding and IVF and developing really amplifying the genetics that we need to deliver calves that will go to work for Adam and going to work for Arla and others. So there's so much we can do, but we have to start with those guys that are going to demonstrate, and then they're the ones. We've got what we call the man in the pub syndrome, but a vet can talk to a farmer for a long time about something, and then they come in one day and say, "Oh, I was talking to Bill in the pub and he vaccinates his calves against salmonella. I think I might start." And it's a bit tongue-in-cheek, isn't it? But I'm saying it to make a point. But the man in the pub, you are influenced by your peers.
Completely, and it's a lot about confidence, isn't it? So Adam, I'm just going to flip that slightly, and farmers always see a lot more cost as we go down this route, and that's the first thing they see, which is an obvious response. But how do we get them to see the potential savings? And I think David just touched on there, through the genetics, the data, increasing productivity. You know, is there a message flipping situation that we can do here?
I think there's one I always use, and I'm quite a basic type of a guy, so I always try and use basic type of things. But I remember being in the hospital when one of our children was born, and I'm 6'3", my wife's 6 foot, and our little fella was 7 pounds. And there was a couple across the way in the hospital, and they were probably a foot smaller than us, and they had a baby of 12 pounds. And I always say, well, if those two babies were calves, you would definitely say, well, at the same age, and I'd go and buy the big one, of course. And actually, genetics would tell you that our child will probably be 6'3" or 4, and the other child won't be. And I think sometimes what you see and what you know, it's very, very important. So I think we all know the genetics play that big part, and we only need to look at something simply like ourselves to understand, you know, that these are the real key factors. So I think life can be very simple. I think often we overcomplicate things, and it's like, you know, we do things like milk powder and various different things. And the trouble is, when you're talking and you get into all the real detail, sometimes it's quite basic, isn't it? You know, I'm a basic guy. We work with a company in the Netherlands that feed over 1 million calves. Well, you would normally say that if they don't have their products right, then really they should be, not what Jack in the pub says, that his calves did really well. It's got to be fact based, and I think the more, and I think a lot of farmers are really changing their mind and saying, okay, go on, what's the data on this? And I think normally for me, I'm not that much of an intelligent guy to think of all these ideas myself. I normally just copy somebody good, so I just keep watching somebody good at these things.
That's the best way to be, I think, Adam. All three of you mentioned the gap between consumers and farmers. And now as an industry, how do we bridge that gap and inform our consumers, etc., with the accurate information that some of it we've got and some of it will develop? So shall we go back to Alice on this one?
Yeah, and I think this comes back to, you know, we have to have our house in order and be absolutely confident that we can defend every single farm before we go out there bold. I know certainly some of the farms within aligned groups, like with Tesco, Sainsbury's groups, get very frustrated that they don't do more to promote the work of their group. But as soon as you go out with something positive, you just get knocked down with the negatives. I think we have to accept that you can't go head to head with those already distant from dairy. And so actually, when we know and have confidence that the house is in order with good standards backing it up, we go out there and tell that through truth and transparency, with farmers front and centre of that campaign. just looking into a farmer's eyes, how much they care. And that's the angle that our consumers aren't seeing. And when they see that, that is incredibly powerful. And that's why I'm so proud of our brand, because I think it is incredibly authentic, because it's owned by the farmers and it's them driving these standards. It's not telling us to do them. They see the value in it because they're desperate to tell the right story and the bright side of farming. So yeah, we can't wait to do that and close that gap because it's needed.
Shall I hand that one over to Adam? You got anything to add to it at all?
Sorry, I was struggling with, as I said in my slides, and as Alice has said, I think we've got to make sure our house is in order, because and this is a really difficult subject, because it is, as Alice said earlier, it's easy to knock somebody or knock something, and it's very hard to demonstrate that there's always somebody to say, oh well, that's not true, or this. It's a very difficult situation. But I think, often I see things flying around Facebook or different things, and farmers making points, but it seems to be always in the farmer group. I think we've got to sometimes get these good stories out to the wider public, and I think like Open Farm Sundays, all these things, and inviting people around. And sometimes, as I said earlier, it's going to be very hard to change somebody that has decided to go down the vegan route, but there's a lot of people sat on the fence that we could really try and influence and try and bring round and try and show them. And I think maybe going back to the schools and really trying to get some of these schools and show the children what happens and explain why we eat meat and all these different things, I think, or drink milk. I think we need to probably start it at the roots, really. We start at a young age.
And get that message through, don't we? I've got a message here, a question from Claire Watts. I hope I pronounced that correctly. I'll read it out. It's quite a long one, but it's clearly important that animals experience high welfare and that customers appreciate that this is the case. My concern is public perceptions of good welfare do not necessarily coincide with the view of the animals themselves. Understanding this requires techniques such as preference testing, adequately controlled trials which contain sufficient numbers. The solution also needs to be financially viable. Obtaining this information requires data sharing, investment in research. My question is, how can the industry do more and ensure that what they are advocating really is doing the best by the animal? So we'll head back to David for that one.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Claire, for that question. I know Claire quite well, and she's highly respected, so I don't really I feel underqualified to answer, but I think fundamentally, I think Claire touched on a really important point. We're at a stage now that we do have to do a lot more trial on what animals prefer, and try and get that information out there as well. And that it's a horrible, cold, wet, rainy day here today, and I'm sure the cows wouldn't like to be out in the Cumbrian fells. They'd much rather be in on a mattress, and but the public think, well, they should be out grazing because they're grazing animals. So I think Claire's right, but we need some evidence behind that. So things like trials whereby cattle have got the opportunity to go and loaf, or otherwise, or select a bedding area, or select a social group. So Claire's right, but that's quite, we have to get the benchmarking and the science behind that, and actually ask the animals to, in a very clever scientific way, what they want. We can't assume that we know what a dairy cow or a dairy calf wants. We can make a guess, but we need to do more of that. But it's a massive subject.
No, thank you for that. I've just got one quick question from Gwyn Jones. That will just
Sorry, Di, could I just come in on that? Because actually there's a super question from Claire, and the one debate that really upsets me is this: to graze or not to graze, because actually a good farmer is a good farmer whatever the system. And actually through the Arla 360 programme, we are we're doing those exact trials that David describes, looking at cow preferences. And it was in the press this week, the happy cow measure. Whilst that irritates farmers to use that because it's not really farmer language, we look at more content cows, but consumers want to be reassured that the cows are happy. So we're looking at this really smart data tech, which is allowing us to measure positive cow behaviours. So when they're interacting indoors, social grooming, so that we have the data to back up the fact that just because they're housed, they're really well cared for and looked after.
No, it's a really good point to make. So one final quick question then, we've got a minute, from Gwyn. Gwyn's concern is about the spring block Jersey calves in terms of making them viable. and looking at sort of better crosses on their cows and better genetics when using beef straws. How can we sort of talk to those farmers and improve that side of it? Probably a question for Adam there. And we have 1 minute, Adam.
Okay, I'll hurry up, yeah. So, I mean, I think that's already starting to happen. I've actually been around quite a lot of farms this week, and I certainly think the Arla farmers are in front of everybody. I think Arla have done a really good job at this, and they're all talking the right language. And I think, going back to what David says, you know, if we can get some of those Arla farmers to go to the pub when they're open and start telling the others how easy it is to get good genetics in there, that will actually make it work even better. And I'm feeling there is a real change. I was on 7 or 8 farms the last few days, and they are starting to really think about, you know, using the correct genetics. So I think, and I know Gwyn has done a serious lot of work on this, and is probably one of the best voices in the industry, actually. So I think Gwyn, really keep doing your good work. I think it will certainly help a lot. So yeah, I think the message is getting out there.
That's excellent. So it just leaves me really to let's have a vote to open the pubs, because I think that will solve a lot of our problems. But no, thank you all 3 of you for joining us today. It's been a really interesting topic to discuss, and I'm sure we could actually go on for twice as long. So thank you very much for your contributions there. And we're actually now going to move on to Robert Craig, who's going to take the helm from me, and he's going to be talking about farm efficiencies and sustainability. So it's goodbye from me, and thank you again to all 3 of you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.